escape or die. Weeks had passed since Sue became a captive, slaving away in the fields. Sue longed to live her own life again, free to do what she wanted. A dream life she hoped to experience again before dying. But the tyrants remained one step ahead of her. They had foiled her feeble escape plans 3 times. Each time she got up the nerve, they altered their patrols. Too many eyes watching her every move. She needed to run. Sue needed to enlist the help of other prisoners if she ever hoped to gain her freedom. Tom had hung a few captives once a week as a warning to the others to not resist or think about escaping. Most had done nothing wrong. The violent act had caused the remaining prisoners to lose their courage. It left behind a defeated group willing to cave into the demands of their oppressors. A hopeless situation. Sue refused to capitulate and accept defeat. A renewed spirit, determined to escape this hell at any cost, filled her, even if failure meant her death or the death of someone else. Never surrender, because death was a better option than this life. She kept her head down, avoiding any unnecessary attention. Listen, observe, and plan became her mantra for survival. Discover their weakness before they discovered her intentions. Act before they did. But she still needed to be smart. Otherwise, she'd end up being hung. As she wandered through the retreat around midnight, she overheard a conversation between Tom and Bob, 2 men vying for the most evil man alive award. She hid in the shadows, listening in. "I agree, but we're going to need more food to make it through the winter." "Push Wendy harder," Bob chuckled. "You'd need a bulldozer to push that fat bitch any harder. She's got the brains of a stone, pushing those women past their abilities. They all gonna break soon, and then we'll have to hit the fields ourselves. I warned you against freeing those women from the prison, Bob. You've been enjoying Carmela for yourself, Tom. Don't be a hypocrite. We're getting off track. This mess is why we need to trade. They have food in those warehouses, but they want women. We'll send them the prison women, that new woman Sue, and some of the worn-out ones from the whorehouse. In return, we'll get food for the winter. Win-win for us. Yeah, you're right. We can hunt us some more younger ones once they solve the food supply issue." A smile broke out on Tom's face as he patted Bob on the shoulder. "Now you're talking, Bob. We'll unload the deadweight in 2 days. Put together a crew you trust. Now, if you'll excuse me, Carmela is waiting." Tom whistled a tune as he strolled away. Once out of view, Bob spat on the ground, shaking his head. He shuffled away in the opposite direction. Sue's heart sank. This camp hadn't been kind to her, but she feared running away on her own. No choice, since her time here had ended, unless she accepted this new role as a sex slave. Not a destiny she wished to fulfill. The next day, the unrelenting sun beat down upon them. It hadn't rained for a week, and it appeared the streak wouldn't break. Her fat, cruel taskmaster stared at the wilting plants. "Sue, you get to haul some water from the well today. Get your skinny ass moving." Wendy burst out laughing after glaring at Sue. Another back-breaking chore, hauling the water 1,000 yards from the well to that garden. They had built some sort of sprinkler contraption, but it required a full tank of water to operate. Sue planted the end of her shovel outside of the garden area, not needing it for this task. She strapped the large tank to her back, knowing it would weigh almost 200 pounds on her return trip from the well. Once she poured the water in the tank, she'd only have 50 more trips to make. The effort might kill her. A better outcome than surviving as a sex slave. Her walk to the well took her outside of the stone-walled area. Any thoughts of escape disappeared with the barbed wire-topped chain link surrounding the utility area. It felt good escaping the eyes of all the guards. They couldn't patrol on top of the fence, so they ignored this area. Sue had heard a rumor about another prisoner cutting a small hole in the fence a few days earlier. They had hoped to use it to escape this hellhole. Another dreamer who died at the hands of these madmen. Her eyes swept the fence as she pumped the hand pump, filling the backpack tank. As she reached the halfway point, her arms burned. This would be a long day. Wait! She saw the cut links in the fence behind the well, blocked from view by anyone in the camp. Could she make it if she ran? Wishful thinking. The closest guard would cut her down before she could slip underneath. She longed to try and die rather than live this terrible life. Screams erupted in the camp. a group of prisoners fought with the guards. All eyes turned to the chaos. Her heart raced. An opportunity. Would she ever get another? Sue released the pump handle, letting it pop upward with a clang. She took a step toward the fence, knocking the container over. The precious water spilled on the dry ground. Without looking back, Sue sprinted toward the hole in the fence. Escape or die trying. Never a fan of vigorous exercise, Sue sprinted for her life. Her heart pounded and she found it difficult to breathe. But the forced labor had strengthened her body, so she pushed herself beyond her limits. Arms pumped hard in time with her flailing legs. Shouts sounded out behind her. She had no idea if they called after her or if there were warnings for someone else. Sue refused the urge to slow or look back to find out. If they caught her now, she would hope for death. "You get your ass back here, bitch, or we're gonna kill your friends!" Guilt threatened to stop her, but she pushed it deep down inside and continued to sprint toward freedom. She had no friends in this camp or outside of it. The civilized part of her brain questioned if she would sacrifice the lives of other prisoners to save herself. Sue wouldn't stop. She'd hoped for the best, figuring they were already short on help at the camp. Part of her hated herself for being a coward. Even with all her doubts, Sue made it to the woods stretching out beyond the camp. She disappeared into the thick foliage, letting it swallow her up. Sue hoped the fight had been severe enough that they wouldn't come looking for her. To avoid a fall, she slowed her pace. Too many twisted roots waiting to snag her ankle. A broken bone meant death. The woods continued on forever. Sue wondered if she had just run around in circles. Ending up at the camp's front gate would be a cruel twist. Hours of wandering brought her to a clearing. Hundreds of acres of corn, only knee-high, filled the field in front of her. A strong delineation between the overgrown forest and the open countryside. She spun in a circle, expecting to see her captors standing right behind her, but she stood alone at the edge of freedom. At least Sue hoped for freedom. A smile stretched across her face, turning into a bout of laughter. Sue had eluded her captors. They wouldn't catch her now. At least she prayed for this truth. After a moment of reflection, her vitals returned to normal. Sue felt an overwhelming gratitude for her freedom, even if she didn't have a plan for her next move. Deal with one problem at a time. All her actions since the EMP attack had been reactionary, not part of any plan for survival. She needed to move, increasing her distance from the dangerous community she escaped. No sense jumping into the fire after getting burned. The fresh air outside of the prison walls energized her. Sue hadn't felt this free since before the power failed. She'd reclaim her life on her own. Find security on her terms. Take one step at a time. If Dan could see her now, would he be proud of her or think her foolish? Why did she still want his approval? A desperation for a life of safety and security led her to trust the wrong people. Predators preying on the vulnerable. Her naive mistakes horrified her. She wouldn't commit the same blunder again. No more being an easy target for those who look to take advantage of her. Sue would get tough surviving in this fallen world. After reining in her emotions, Sue crossed the cornfield. If the plants had been mature, she would have had food to eat. She traveled until the sun sunk towards the horizon before finding an abandoned farmhouse. A pantry filled with food and water, a comfortable bed, along with a solid structure surrounding her, provided Sue the comfort she needed to fall into a deep sleep. Her best night of sleep in months. The bright morning sun leaked into the room, waking Sue from a strange dream. As consciousness solidified, the dream became vapor. One look around the room reminded Sue of her nightmare existence. She lightened the pantry to start her day. With a full stomach, Sue explored the house and its grounds. In the barn, Sue discovered a rusty old pickup truck covered in dust. Dan had told her how old vehicles had no modern electronics. It might run even after the EMP. Hope threatened to overwhelm her as she cleared the dirty window, revealing a set of keys gleaming in the ignition. The hinges creaked in protest as Sue yanked on the rusty door. A cloud of dust from the interior irritated her throat. She turned the key, fantasizing about giving her tired feet a break. Imaginary AC blew across her tanned skin, evaporating her sweat. Her efforts to start the old jalopy rewarded her with nothing. Not even a pop from the old truck's engine. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she sat on the dusty, torn bench seat in the dead pickup truck. After mourning the transportation she never had, Sue filled an old backpack with all the supplies she could carry. Another day of hiking toward an unknown destination lay ahead of her. Even with her waning trust of others, Sue knew she had to find some trustworthy people. A group where everyone worked together for the common good, not enslaving each other. Sue walked for most of the day before the tall chain-link fence came into view. It surrounded a half-dozen tents, a 2-story building, along with 3 military vehicles. Men and women roamed the grounds, all dressed in military fatigues. 2 armed soldiers stood on each side of the entry gate. After all her previous missteps, Sue debated if she should approach the camp. They appeared well organized with a secure area, but could she trust another group? A deep voice boomed from behind her, ending the brief internal argument. "Let's see your hands, lady. Don't do anything stupid and you won't get hurt." Sue turned and found 2 men with angry eyes pointing rifles at her. She raised her hands, complying with their command. They left no option for her to escape.